Hey Dreamers, I can't believe it. We are so close to Dreamers Podcast existing for 3 whole years. To celebrate this amazing accomplishment, I have decided to put together a live event here just outside of Philadelphia, May 20th. DreamCon will be an all-day event where you can meet past guests, network with other Dreamers, and play minute-to-win-it games to raise money for charity, and of course so much more. Tickets are on sale now at superjoepardo.com/DreamCon. I can't wait to see you all there. Hey Dreamers, my guest today is making her dreams come true by growing her business, which is always so great to hear when anybody is doing what it is that they love, and at least I assume that she's doing something that she loves. And growing her business along the way is part of what she's doing. Dreamers, I'd like to welcome to the show Joanna Turner. How you doing?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, Joe.
You are so very welcome. Thank you for reaching out. I think was it Sam Riley's episode that you had found?
Yeah, I think that's how I went down the rabbit hole.
Oh, that's right. I think it was I was on her show and you found
you were on
found about me.
Hers, and then I heard you on Paul's as well.
Oh, right. Awesome, yeah. And Paul's been a guest on the show as well. Yeah. So Joanna, why don't you give some background about yourself?
Sure. So we were just laughing about my accent. I'm originally from Scotland. I've been away from there about 13 years now. But originally I was an accountant. So for a long time, I was not doing what I loved. And I'm very, very grateful that that's all changed. And I've been running my own business for just under 3 years now. And my whole life is dramatically different. I'm so much happier and very grateful to be on this journey, but it didn't all happen overnight. I was definitely ignoring a whole bunch of signs for a long time, being an accountant, doing that job I hated, and I was actually stopped in my tracks by a back injury. I was doing surf lifesaving here in Australia. It's like a volunteer lifeguard at the beach, and out in one of the rescue boats, I crashed over a big wave and really hurt my lower back. So at the time, it probably seemed like the worst thing in the world because I couldn't get out of bed the next morning. But in hindsight, looking back, it was the best thing that's ever happened because it gave me the time and space to reevaluate my life. And it actually physically stopped me sitting in my desk because there's not much would stop me from sitting in my desk and working the long hours in my old job. So it gave me a little bit of time and space to reevaluate my life and what was going on. And I finally had a little bit of time to start studying something. And I'm always curious about natural health, so I ended up studying nutrition and started on this journey as a health coach, but it's very far away from what I do now because I very quickly realized certainly the people that were coming to me really wasn't about what we were eating. It was more about the underlying emotions and why we weren't doing what we were doing. So that has then led down another rabbit hole into learning all about the subconscious and NLP and our thoughts and our behaviors and patterns, and which has then led into a massive spiritual awakening. And now I help female entrepreneurs build their businesses by letting go of money visibility blocks, but also creating more flow in their lives and really living in alignment, which is what I'm still on my journey learning to do as well.
Well, I think that the living in alignment thing is a constant battle, right? It's something that you don't just wake up one day and be like, okay, I got this, and you figure out, because you might not even like the balance that you give yourself that you think you might like till you get there.
Yes, absolutely. I've been in that situation a few times, and 6 months later, I'm like, I am so bored of myself. This is terrible. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting journey for me my whole life. My company, ironically, is called Mission for Balance. When I named it that, I didn't really know anything, but I now see the sort of irony in all of that. But anyway.
So So I gotta ask, what pulls you down to Australia?
Originally, I would have said it was a sense of adventure, but I was probably still running away from myself, trying to create this perfect life that I envisioned. My mum actually came here in the 60s traveling for a couple of years and never shut up about it. So I knew it was going to be a cool place that I'd love. But I think the my love of travel has come from more of a searching for, I'm like, there must be something else, there must be some meaning here. I wasn't enjoying what I was doing, and so I was always looking for like a beautiful environment to live in to do my boring job. I was like, well, at least if I'm an accountant, I can go live in Australia. And I lived in Bermuda for 6 years. So I was always sort of out there looking for something, I think. Is the more truthful answer, not necessarily my sense of adventure, but I didn't realize the answers were maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, go figure, right?
Right? It's like, damn, I've been all over the world. What is this? I still haven't found the meaning to life.
Yeah, well, it really does come back to doing what it is that you really love. And I mean, you probably wouldn't mind being an accountant if you only had to do it maybe 3 hours a day, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and got to live in an awesome place that, and afforded you the ability to go out and enjoy the area in which you were living. But the reality is that that isn't generally the reality, unless you make it
Right.
your reality. Um, so yeah, so let's talk about the some of the first steps that you started to take once you decide you were going to start your own business.
Sure. So I did it in a way that I wouldn't always recommend. I'd been studying for about 6 months, and then I was so excited about starting my own business that and I was sitting at my work and I'm ordering my business cards and having all these books delivered, and I was like I was really struggling to concentrate because I'd seen the other side. And so I ended up quitting about 6 months earlier than I had planned and just diving headlong into it. So I don't recommend everybody quits their job when they're doing that. Definitely either transitioning or building it up on the side is something I would actually recommend. I just physically couldn't do that any longer. I had this great plan. I was like, I'll stay till the next bonus season is over and blah, yada, yada. But yeah, that didn't quite work out like that. But I was very, very lucky. One of the first things I did through the power of, Facebook ads and serendipity was um, I was introduced to my first business mentor, and I jumped into a program pretty much the same week I quit my job, and um, that taught me everything I knew because everybody when I was quitting my job was like, "Oh, you're an accountant, you'll have no problem. Oh, sure, running a business will be easy," and yeah, the realities of running an online business, I'm still laughing at what I didn't know before I started, and I'm very grateful that things aligned that I was able to get guidance from the very beginning, which I think has really accelerated my growth in my business.
Being excited, it's just like if you were excited being an accountant, you would have kept being an accountant.
Right, right,
And probably been more excited that you're like, hey, I get to be an accountant and I get to live in Australia. This is pretty sweet.
right.
As a bonus to what you're already doing and enjoying. But I'm curious as to how do you feel that being an having that accountant background has really helped you in your business?
Um, do you know, I wouldn't say that many of the skills have been transferable, which is kind of ironic. I've had to when I started my business, I was like, I just want to help people and coach them, and I realized I had to come in and start being a copywriter, a blogger, a website designer, a branding expert, a salesperson, a online marketing guru, and I had to not just learn my new skill and my new love, but put on all these different hats. And there were so many areas that, I had never explored before. And I think I didn't choose accounting, but that's another story. But I feel like I went down that road because I was better at with numbers than I was with words. And so I don't know how much of it has actually helped me, apart from it has taught me to be, I mean, obviously running the numbers on the backside is a little bit helpful, but I actually have somebody that helps me with that, because I was so disillusioned with being an accountant. I didn't even want to really deal with that in my own business, to be totally honest, which is kind of funny. It's like I know what to do, I just don't actually want to do it because I was so over it from the past. I guess what it did give me was an incredible tenacity, and a work ethic, which actually has been more of an undoing than a good thing. And in the first couple of years of my business, I was working incredible hours, and I'm only beginning to realize that well, it's been a little while, but it's not necessarily the way forward. And what I'd actually done in the first place was not create less work for myself. I'd actually gone from a job where I thought I worked way too much, maybe 8 till 8 in the busy times and a day at the weekend, to working more like sort of 12 to 14-hour days, 6-7 days a week in the first year. So I don't know how well it actually did translate, to be honest. And there's been a lot of more unlearning, which I think has been more important than the transferring of the skills, like, if that makes sense.
Well, no, it does. And it totally makes sense that you wanted to disconnect from what you were already doing. And honestly, it probably was a good thing, because if everything else wasn't going right for you, you probably would have reverted back to just sticking your nose in the books of the numbers and not wanting to come out of it, because like, oh, I can do this really well, even though it's not what I want to do. And this part, I can make this part run efficiently, even though like nothing else really matters if all the other things don't work out first.
Right.
And the fact that you really have to be the driving force behind all those other things, not necessarily just running your books.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the thing, I wasn't really learning much in my old role. Like I felt very stuck, and I feel like this has ignited a curiosity and a learning. I think that's the thing I'm excited about, because in the past I was like, meh, I probably will never study anything again. I wasn't interested in anything. Nothing really lit me up, and I just thought that was kind of a sad situation. But going down into this amazing sort of world, I don't think I'll ever stop learning. And now I'm very grateful that I'm just so curious about everything. I think that's what I'm really grateful about as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that curiosity is really what's needed to keep pushing you to go forward, right? Like if you weren't curious, then it probably wouldn't work out very well. And if it wasn't very challenging, you wouldn't probably have found that interest, because again, it goes back to the curiosity and how much you're investing yourself into it. And if it just comes easy, then like I have a thing. So like for a long time, I've played like hockey for a while, like 8 years now. And I only just started when I was like 22. So I really sucked. I mean, I still am not very good at all. But I was really, really bad when I started, and somebody kept asking, like one of the refs kept asking, he's like, you should just quit. You should just give up. And I'm like, but if I was that good at this, it wouldn't be challenging. And if it wasn't challenging, it wouldn't be fun. So, and if I was that good at it, I would go get a contract to go play for a professional team. So, you know what I mean? So like it's that challenge, that drive to want to be challenged and to constantly try to get better, time and time again.
I love that, because something I heard recently, and I think most of us get caught up in the destination, right? We're like, oh, when I get there, when I'm successful, I'll be successful when I get to this point. And what you're finding the fun in is the progress. And I think, as entrepreneurs and people starting our businesses, we've got to find the fun in the progress, because we're never going to meet whatever our definition of I'll be successful when is. So, and I think that's where so many people get caught up, is where, they're impatient. It hasn't happened yet. Why am I not there? And really, if we can just, congratulate ourselves for, whatever we achieved today, and just be glad we've made some progression. I think that's the answer to everything. So I think there's a profounder meaning in your lesson than.
Well, there is a lot there as far as success is such a subjective thing. I like when you compare yourself to somebody else, then success is a lot easier to define, right? Because it's like, oh well, they haven't done X amount of something quantifiable, right? So to me, it was like, okay, I've done 280 episodes. Like, that's a lot of episodes to a lot of other podcasters, but there's a lot of people that have a lot more episodes than me. But you try not to get too caught up in that idea of like, okay, I'll be successful when this happens, unless you really define like a generalization of like success. Now, goals are different, right? Because you're like, oh, I succeeded at meeting my goal. My goal could be, today is to make X amount of dollars by this day. But then when you get there, it's like, oh, great, that I did that. Now let's move on. Now, especially when you're quantifying in dollars, it's like, well, things change, right? It's like, oh, well, I brought on more employees. Well, now we got to get more money to pay for said employees to continue the process. Or now I have more clients that are coming on, so I need to increase my expenses by increasing employees or increasing hours or increasing automation services, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's always going to be something else. And then at some point it's like, oh, well, we've done X amount of dollars. Well, that's great. What was the profit? Well, the profit wasn't nearly what we wanted it to be. So we had to set a goal. So hopefully we can succeed that goal. But like I said, the idea of success, really, you have to set the tone for what that overall is going to be. And if that's like, hey, I want to live comfortably in Australia, doing my thing, I don't need to make $1 million. Like, that's not my thing. As long as I'm living comfortably, it's cool. That to you could be success. But of course, there's always gonna be somebody who's like, yeah, well, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm making like 10 times the amount of money you're making. And then that's when jealousy comes into play, and like, oh man, we're still human. How'd that happen?
I know. But I mean, I see so many people though, even though when they reach their own definition of success, they're still not happy. And they're like, oh crap, I thought when I had the $1 million in the bank, I'd be happy. And I said to my coach this year, I was like, if I meet my financial goal, but I've gained 20 pounds and, I'm burnt out, I said, that's not a success. So yep. I was like, I can't, I'm not going all out for that at the expense of everything else. So yeah, it's getting really clear about like, does that really, what is success to you, and what does it look like, and how do you define that, and making yourself, there's this other pieces like that I'll be successful when. The real secret in all of this is that you will never get there unless you feel successful now. And that's the real trick about speeding it up, is to feel good about yourself now instead of constantly comparing yourself to where you're not. And I sort of look at it as we have a gap from where we are to where we want to be and where we've come from. And the biggest mistake I see people falling into all the time is we're comparing ourselves to where we're not yet, that forward gap. And so we're always going to fall short. So we feel crap, and then we're like, we feel unsuccessful because we haven't reached that mystical place that we perceive will feel fabulous. And then, but if we can be more focused on acknowledging where we've come from and how far we've come, and appreciate ourselves for that actually breeds more of it, which is kind of a backwards way of thinking about it for some people, but I actually think it's the secret to all of this.
I couldn't agree more.
Good.
Yeah, no, I mean, going from the idea that's like, okay, yeah, I could money just makes you more of the person you are anyway. So
Right.
and anybody that doesn't understand that, like, they don't, personally, I don't think they know what they're talking about. And especially with my background, like, they don't know what they're talking about. So uh it's it does kind of breed the idea of like knowing of bringing out that you more and more of like that you maybe you don't really know what you want in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a good example is like a very good friend of mine and I many years ago were like talking about like, okay, if we had like unlimited funds, and we're both like tech guys, so it's like at the time it's like, well, what kind of phones and what kind of cars and what kind of this and what kind of that would you buy? Like, if you had unlimited funds, like, why wouldn't you just buy all of the phones and then figure out which one you want to use? Or why wouldn't you just buy all the laptops or buy all the cars and figure out which one you want to drive, or just own all the cars? Like, heck, at that point. And I told him, like, hey, that sounds really cool, but in reality, like, I like doing the research to figure out which one is the best well-rounded, or the best performance for dollar, or the best fit for my realistic needs, and not necessarily just being like, yeah, I'll just buy all of them and figure it out. Like, I don't know, I enjoy the research, I enjoy the process of figuring things out and dissecting things, and dissecting my life and asking those questions of like, do I really need this? How do I integrate this? And maybe I'll buy it and I'll have it for a little while, and then I'll just sell it online because I could always buy it again later if the the need comes. But yeah, so having that real clear definition of what kind of life you want first, and then figuring out what you can do to make that kind of life happen is infinitely more important to me than like, okay, how do we make a bunch of money and then we'll figure it out later. And in a lot of people's cases, like if you go to school, right, you have those student loans, like you've kind of cemented the idea that this is the life that you're choosing because you have to pay those loans back. And a lot of kids, they don't get that. They don't understand that it's not just about the loan, right? It's about like, where do you want to be in 5 years or 10 years, and then actually figuring out like those questions, because that's a big broad question, but realistically there's a lot of little questions that add up to that question that a lot of times we don't get asked those questions when we're younger.
Oh, I mean, I'm like, absolutely. I had no idea when I started this business. I was asked like what I desired, and that's slightly like not just wanted, but really desired. And I was like, I don't know. I really didn't have like an answer. I'd never stopped long enough to give myself the space to even think about it. And it's very difficult to create this amazing life of what you want if you don't know what you want, right? So, right, and I think it's something we don't stop and think about long enough. It's like, what do I want? Like, what does it look like? And sometimes, money, I talk a lot about money and how to help people make it, but at the end of the day, it's like I think it used to be 50 and now it's 70,000 a year. Money only has a 10% impact on your happiness, because exactly like you were saying, like you have a nice car and you have a great phone, like you just don't need 10 phones. It's like that would be overwhelming and probably make you more unhappy, because you'd be like, oh my God, I have all these phones, I don't know what to do with myself, right?
It just breeds more excess, because then you're like, well, maybe I need a room in the house for my phones.
Well, you might
to just have them all, like.
Yeah, I watched a documentary just recently it was Netflix, on minimalism, and there's these two guys, and they basically get rid of almost, not completely, all their stuff, but if they didn't absolutely love like their things, like this guy, I think he had like, I don't know, 6 shirts and 2 pairs of shoes, and maybe that's most men, but he had like simplified his life down to like, and he said he was so much happier. He was just like he just the he he had things he loved. It's not like he had nothing, but he had simplified his life so much that he was looking inward rather than trying to satisfy his needs externally. And they're going all around the world and doing, think they've written a book or whatever, and they're just talking about this theory, and I was like fascinated by it. I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet. Actually, a friend of the show, Patrick Roan, is in that film. If it's the same one we're talking about.
Yeah, probably. I can't remember the guys' names. So, but yeah, there were two of them, sort of buddies, were doing it. So it was yeah, it was good. It makes you think, right? Like I'm actually a little bit, well, I'm nomadic at the moment, and it's made me really consider everything I have in my life, and whether it's necessary and whether it's actually going to add on to my life or take away from it, because I have to, like, I travel relatively light around the world, so yeah, it's very interesting stuff, right?
It is. It certainly is. So Joanna, how did your family take it when you decided that you were going to start a business?
Oh, great question. Um, they have been very supportive. I will give them that, but they did question. They're like, "Don't you just want to run, the company that you're working in?" They were a little bit confused, but they've actually been really supportive. Um, the trickier stuff has been as I've been sort of going down my spiritual journey, and sort of revealing. My business has sort of cracked me open personally. I used to think I was just this strong, independent woman who had all her stuff together, and I was just starting a business. And I realized I was actually just incredibly emotionally suppressed, independent woman. And so my growing my business has challenged me in so many ways, and personally, not just skills wise, in terms of sort of being visible and coming, you know I came out spiritually as well to my parents, but it's challenged so many beliefs that I didn't know I had. So many, I didn't realize, I actually had a self-worth problem, and I had some underlying stuff to deal with. And I'm incredibly grateful that my business has sort of brought this out, because there were probably areas in my life that I needed to look at and I hadn't been. And that part of the journey, I think, for my parents has almost been more confronting. Me starting a business is just fine, but me looking at all my stuff is a little bit like, oh, and then sharing it with, relatively openly with my community has been a little bit more challenging for them. And yeah, it's just been, I think, because the change has been difficult, and I see that a lot with my clients as well, in different ways. It's actually one of the biggest. I talk money blocks I help people with, and it's one of the biggest things I see, is because we have all of these views and beliefs about money and what that means, and starting a business, and other people can be triggered or be jealous or try and bring you down, or they don't like when things do change. And it can be very difficult, and it can actually be one of the ways that we can sabotage ourselves when we're growing a business, because we don't want to lose our friends and family over it if they don't agree or they don't understand, or and so it can actually be a really big driving factor. I've even seen, marriages fall apart because one is going for it and changing, and then going through this big personal development growth because of their business, and the other partner isn't, and it can cause all sorts of problems, or issues even within friendships. I've not lost friends necessarily, but more become, and not consciously, but more become distant from certain people, and moved further and further away from my old life. And at times it has felt a bit lonely. And I think as well, when you're starting a business, sometimes it's hard enough to convince yourself that it's a good idea. It's a big brave move, and then you don't want to be surrounding yourself with people who are questioning it or questioning you, or bringing you down about it. So I think, again, sort of naturally or unconsciously, my friend circle has sort of changed and shifted as I've grown in this way, because my interests have changed, the way I talk's changed. My friends think I'm bonkers. My family thinks I'm absolutely lost it. They do not understand what's going on at the moment, and that's just fine. But I was home at Christmas. My dad actually suggested that I was like checked into the nearest mental home. Like I mean, and that I'm not exaggerating. He probably suggested that 2 or 3 times. And once when I was a kid, I was about 14, and I had a big spiritual moment, I suppose. And I won't go into it, but I was seeing entities, and my mum took me to the doctors and was like, my daughter is losing her mind. Like, what can we do to her? What can we do about it? Wow. And yeah, so it's been it's kind of fun, but yeah, it's that part's been a little bit challenging, to be honest. But they're trying to come around.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can imagine that it would be tough for them, especially if they're not used to it, and if your friend circle isn't already accustomed to it, then it would be pretty difficult to for them to see and understand what it is that you're doing and the direction that you're going. And sure, I've had plenty of friends that didn't understand, and I've they have come around. They're seeing the success in their eyes, the success of what I'm doing, and that I've made a free show into a living, I guess is the word. It's that period to a certain extent. So yeah, it definitely can be difficult to deal with. Now, with that said, what's been the biggest roadblock for you?
Oh, great question. Myself. If I'm getting really honest, it was all of the stuff that I didn't realize I had going on. And so not only have I been building my business, I've been really growing and healing myself at the same time. So I feel like it's taken a little bit longer than it's been very quick, but at the same time, I feel like it could have happened faster if I hadn't been going through this big growth and awakening. But at the same time, it might not have happened at all if I hadn't gone through that. So, I mean, it's funny, like we're on here, we're talking, but the first time I got on stage, I felt like I had this message that I had to share. And so I was like, I better go get speaker training. And I just cried. I was like, one of my biggest fears is rejection. And I have a thing with worrying about what people think about me and judgment. And so for me, putting myself out there, being visible, I mean, yesterday I filmed videos all day, and I did a couple of like video interviews, and I now host live events, and I'm sort of on stage, and that, to get me to those points, I've had to go through so much like healing and release work to allow myself to do that. And it's something I actually help my clients with, because it's such a fundamental problem in our industry. Is, we want to be seen, and we want to put ourselves out there, and we want to, attract clients because we want to help them. But we're so sort of almost paralyzed by our own stuff that we procrastinate, or we sabotage, and don't actually take the steps to be more out there. And I can see where I haven't done it, and I can see where I still don't do it. And I'm getting a lot better, and most people would say I'm one of the more confident people I've ever met, but I didn't pop out like this. I've been having to grow my confidence, grow my self-worth, which I didn't even know I had a problem with, to be honest. But that's been the biggest roadblock, and then overcoming those things. So, but they've also, every time I've had a quantum leap forward in my personal growth, my business does the same thing. So I can see a direct correlation in like working through the stuff and my business success. So I guess it becomes addictive in that sense.
Well, it is reciprocal. Like because the business goes the way that you go, because you know, when you are the business and the brand and all, it really goes the way you go. And having that having those realizations that you are standing in the way of your own success. It's funny because like that in itself, like I know I've had that realization several times, because it's like I keep getting in the way of myself on the way to where I want to go. For one reason or another. It's not always the same reason. It's not always the same realization, but it just disguises itself in different ways, and that you keep finding it over and over and over again. It's like, hey, I've seen you, old friend, before, and I can't believe I let you in the front door yet again. But I did, and now I'm going to deal with it. And every time, you know, you get a little better at it each time, but it's still both identifying and dealing with it. But yeah, I mean, taking that step back to really evaluate like where you're at, what you want to do, where you want to be, who you want to be, and what you want to help and all that. It's a constant learning process for sure.
Constant. But and I think there's a couple of things, like some people feel, you know, and then there's the fraudster syndrome or imposter syndrome that people get. And, you know, especially if they're starting a new job or a new venture outside of what they're previously trained in. And while I'm a big fan of getting qualified and, you know, whatever you're doing, and I've done so many certifications and courses, there's other people who do that, but then they still don't start. And they're waiting to be, you know, I don't know, at that mystical destination, which never comes, before they get started. And so I'm a big fan of starting before you're ready and just sort of figuring it out along the way. One of my friends was like, how do you do what you do? And I was like, oh, I'm just making it up as I go along. And and she was like, what? And I'm like, oh, sure. Like, I don't know. Like, you know, and I think the beauty of it is we all are, in a way, like, because if you're not meeting things that you don't know how to do, you're not really growing either, right? Like,
Oh, definitely.
so you're not really challenging yourself. So I'm like, I'm hoping that everyone is secretly making it up as they go along.
And they totally are. I mean, but it's the willingness to learn. It's the willingness to figure it out. It's the willingness to understand that, you know, necessity is the mother of all invention. And hey, you're not going to figure out the world's problems by not like tackling them one on one, one at a time on the road to figuring out. Because, you know, and as you know, and as I know, it's like every time you if you have this really big complex problem, you got to fix it like piece by piece by piece by piece, because every time you fix something in those steps, it's going to break something else along the way. So if you try to just fix it all at once, or tackle it all at once, especially if it's a complex problem, if it's a really simple, it could be a really big problem, but just a really simplistic problem. But in most cases, it's like you just aren't looking deep enough to see all the little things that are involved to make it happen. So yeah, it's really that process of like, okay, we're gonna fix it, and wait till we get a different reaction or a different answer or a different this, and then we can move on to the next problem to fix that problem. And that's where computers for me was like the big thing. It wasn't just about the fact that I love computers. It was about teaching me how to think. Right? Learning how to learn, learning how to think, learning how to use logic, learning how to, you know, solve like problem by step, figuring things out, troubleshooting. And to me, entrepreneurs are really just professional troubleshooters for the business world in general, because we tackle one problem at a time.
I love that. And I think it was Brendan Burchard. I was at his High Performance Academy, and he said, confidence is really just having the faith that you can figure out your problems like one at a time, and that you can figure it out. And he put it in a slightly more eloquent way, but that was the gist of it. He was like, just knowing that you can problem solve because you'll never know everything. And I was like, oh, that's great.
No, I totally agree. I mean, you know, when it comes to solving anything, there's two resources: time or money. You can spend time or you can spend money. If you
Right.
don't have one or the other, then you should spend the other. You know what I mean? Like it just
Right.
it's just a trade off. So so I gotta ask you though, because you were saying that you didn't have a whole lot of self-confidence growing up, which, by the way, I'm from the same boat, so you're in good company. What was your
Good.
childhood dream growing up?
Um, oh, great question. Again, I've sort of, I think I had a few dreams, which is part of the problem probably. But what a part of me wanted to be an artist, and then the other part wanted a corner office in a big fancy office building and get dressed up every day. And the other one just wanted their own business. So I've sort of lived out. I'm now living out two of those, and I guess I'll be an artist at some point. But it's yeah, I've always wanted my own business. My dad, both my parents run their own businesses, and it seemed I kind of wanted. I think probably growing up watching movies, I wanted to try the big shiny office, corner office. That didn't work out for me, but it's yeah, I've always wanted to do something. I think I struggle with being told what to do, and yeah, so being my own boss definitely makes more sense. But I didn't really know what that looked like. I used to write out lists of. I thought I might have a cafe or a restaurant or a gift shop or um, something like that, and I just write out lists and lists and lists of potential things I could do, and I never thought it would look quite like this, but I'm very glad it does.
So, with that said, what do your dreams for the future look like?
Oh, great question. More of the same, but I really what I'm loving is the most is the interaction and the event space. So I ran an event a big 3 day event last year, and we're just in starting the planning for this next one coming up, and that lights me up the most, along with interviews. I actually want to start my own podcast, because I have to follow what lights me up the most, and I'm a very people person, and that's what I want to do more of. Plus, I want to write a book and yeah, travel more. But yeah, there's lots of things I want to have happen. But I'm trying to think, is there a big trying to articulate the big dream? But yeah, it's just impacting a whole bunch of people and really helping them to clear the way to live their biggest, boldest vision of their lives. And really, for me, every time I can help somebody, it's everything. Like this is so fulfilling for me. I know we're not supposed to get too emotionally connected to our clients, but one of my clients was just sharing, she's just landed this massive campaign with a internationally recognized brand, and I was just like, literally the tears were just like plonking on my on my desk, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I was just so proud of like where they've come. And if I can like keep creating that and keep having that feeling, then that's everything.
Oh,
It was really
I know you're not supposed to be connected, but you know what? I mean, that's what makes us human. And if you don't feel that way, then maybe you should think about doing a corporate business, corporate
right.
environment, because that's where that's for, right? That's where that's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you're not supposed to, and you don't get connected because you're just like, I'm doing my job and it's whatever. Then I can retire and do what it
Yeah.
is that I want to do. So yeah, you really you should be connected, and I'm glad to hear that you
Mm.
are.
Yeah, I mean, the boundaries with it, but yeah, I was just it means so much to me when that happens, and if I can just yeah do more of that, I'll be a happy person, because yeah, the ripple effect is huge, and really, I mean, if big dream is about I was sort of thinking more along the line of what do you want to be when you grow up. But the big dream is, I mean, helping raise the frequency of humanity is like the big one. But,
well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's
one person at a time, right?
Yes, you do. But the thing is the people that you're helping, you got to understand that the ripple effect of who those people are going to go help with their business, everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. So, you helping one person might effectively help hundreds of thousands of people if the product that they bring to market or the company they go and help brings something to market that ends up helping thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all around the world. Like, it really can make a big difference just by helping one other person. It's just that it depends on who that one person is.
Yeah, and I love that. And I'm like funny because I only selfishly work with people who want to help other people. Because then my aim for having this big impact, it happens faster with that ripple effect. So I'm like, oh, you want to have a big impact? Oh, cool. Like, let me help you. Because then they go out and help more people. And yeah, it does create a beautiful ripple effect. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course. So before we share your final thoughts for the show, how can people connect with you?
Sure. You can find me on my website is missionforbalance.com, and I'm all over Facebook. I run a Facebook group called The Entrepreneur Edge, and you can find me on Instagram, Joanna Turner 24. Yeah, I'm all over the place.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely have those in the show notes so people can connect with you. Well, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
It's whatever you're at. If I know it's for dreamers, but it's never too late. I think that's, I look at some of these kids and they're coming in to this industry at 20, and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done it sooner. But now is the right time. Whatever you're at, now is the right time, and you can always overcome anything.
I could not agree more. Joanna, thank you so much for taking the time I think it's like you're like 12 hours, so it's like morning there now, right?
Yeah. I started out pretty early this morning.
Yes, it's pretty early in the morning. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning to come be a part of the Dreamers podcast. And you're welcome back on the show anytime that you have anything going on that you'd love to share. And I would love to just follow up in like a year to check in and see how you've been.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're quite welcome. And thank you for reaching out in the first place to be a guest. It was quite a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dreamers Podcast. Follow us on Twitter @Dreamers Podcast. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Dreamers Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the Dreamers Podcast, please send an email to j@jpar.co. This podcast is copyright 2014 by jpar.co.